Okay, so I'm going to try and talk a little shorter from now on because that last lecture was a little too long. Okay, so what form of social influence is the subject of this cartoon? Okay, so we've got banking on the youth market. We've got the tattoo and piercing shop, and it says, be like all your friends and express your individuality. Open. A lot of, older people, my age and beyond, look at young people being tattooed as a form of going along with the group rather than going against the group. So what we're looking at is tattooing as like a sign of conformity. Conformity is one form of sort of mimicry, where we see what other people are doing and we do it too. Not because we were specifically asked, not because we're necessarily even aware that we're trying to be like somebody else, but we see what everybody else is doing and we choose to go along with it. So conformity is defined as adjusting behavior or thinking to fit within a group standard. And there are different kinds of conformity. There's mimicry, which is automatic. You don't even really know you're doing it. There is the influence of social norms, expectations that come from the group. And then there's social influence, sort of what everybody else is doing. So mimicry, here's a good example of somebody with a, they're mimicking their peers. We got a group of kids all sagging. So everybody's doing the same thing. Automatic mimicry oftentimes manifests itself in the form of like emotions. I've got a link here if you want to watch these slides as a slideshow, and click on this link. It shows an example of emotional contagion. A lot of times when we're in a group of other people, we sort of look around to figure out how everybody else is reacting to the situation. And then our reaction is based on what everybody else is doing. A lot of times it's because we trust that the group knows more than we do, which is something that we'll talk about as we go on in this chapter. But we sort of assume that other people might be privy to information we don't have. And so we rely on them for feedback about how we should act. This goes back all the way from infancy. Babies look to their parents, and we call it social referencing, where a baby's not sure in a situation, like a new person has arrived. Should I be scared of this stranger, or should I be okay with this stranger? And I'll look at my parents and see how my parents are reacting to the stranger, and that helps me to realize, is it a stranger and I should be scared, or oh look, it's a family member who I haven't seen in a long time and I don't remember. We cue off of our parents, we cue off of our family, and as our social networks get larger, so does the type of people that we're willing to pick up their emotions. Now here's an example of an experiment where they were examining emotional contagion. And so, okay, this is a good time in social psychology to define the term confederate. A confederate is a person who is actually part of the experiment, but acts like they're just another participant, so that the real participant thinks that they're on the same level as the confederate, when in fact the confederate is part of the experiment. So here we have in the red columns times when the confederate rubs their face, and they're cued to do it a certain number of times in the experiment. And then we have, so on the left hand side it's the confederate rubs the face, and then whether the participant does it too. On the right hand side in the red bar we have when the confederate rubbed their face, and on the right side is whether the participant actually shook their foot. The blue columns are the times when the confederate shook their foot, and then we have the participant rubbing their face or the participant shaking their foot. What you see is that when the confederate rub their face, the participant's much more likely to rub their face. When the confederate shakes their foot, the participant's much more likely to shake their foot. These kinds of unconscious mimicry, this kind of behavior is really common, and we have a lot of times we have absolutely no idea we're doing it. If somebody points it out to us, we're like, no, we did not. What are you talking about? So that's what we call emotional contagion, or automatic mimicry. Okay, so staying on the topic of conformity, sometimes we are conforming to go along with what we perceive to be the norms for the group, the expectations for the group. A social norm is defined as the, I put in quotation marks, correct way to behave or think in this group. And every group has its own norms. Every group has its own expectations. So as a member of a group, you're sensitive to what the norms are, and you try and behave in a way that corresponds. A lot of times where we get worried about conformity is when the group has an expectation, a norm, that's different from our own judgment, and sometimes we'll go along with the group's judgment rather than our own. And that's where, you know, we worry about ourselves, because it's like, why would I suspend my own judgment and go along with a group who I actually disagree with, but I just don't want to rock the boat or whatever. Well, here's an experiment where they have, okay, the guys with the green bubbles are Confederates. They're part of the experiment, and they've been told what answers to give. The guy with the purple bubble is an actual participant. And they're being shown a square, and the Confederates have been told to say that the geometric shape has 5 sides. And so all the Confederates, and you can see the numbers in front of each of these people, there were 6 Confederates and 1 participant. The guy labeled number 6 is the participant. So here you have 6 people saying that the square has 5 sides, and here's the one real participant going, have I lost my mind? Why are they all agreeing that there are 5 sides on that square? That is clearly what is going on. So here we have an experiment where he's being put into a hotbed where everybody else agrees, and he's going to have to either stick out and stand up for what he knows to be right, or go along. So what do you think will happen? Now again, if you watch this PowerPoint as a slideshow and you click on that link, it'll take you to a variation on the original study that ever examined conformity in this kind of context. And what they found is that the participant goes along with the group about 33% of the time. About a third of the time, the participant will ultimately just go along with the group, even though the group is clearly stating the wrong answer. But the fact that everybody is agreeing produces a motivation to just go along with the group. Now, so now some people have said, well, you can tell from this picture, this is old. They're in black and white. It's like the original study was conducted in the late 50s, and a number of replications occurred through the 60s and into the 70s. But, you know, that's old, right? So a lot of people have said, well, we're a lot less conformist today. We would let the group know that they're wrong, and we would stand up for our own judgment, right? So if you watch this slideshow and click on that bubble that says old irrelevant finding, you'll find a current replication, and you'll see that modern people today still go along with the group rather than, you know, having to sort of fight uphill. So why? Why do we go along? Well, there are 2 types of social influence at play here. One is normative social influence. What they found in the original study is that some of the participants would say they went along to avoid standing out. They didn't want everybody, you know, one of the things that the Confederates were told to do is if the participant actually gave the right answer and defied the group, the Confederates would all turn and look at the participant. If you watch the video, you'll see that happen. They turn and look at him like, what, are you crazy? And then they go back to saying the Confederates go back to saying the wrong answers. That kind of just slight social disapproval where you've been put on the hot seat as the one who's different is enough to get people to go along. We don't want to stand out. We don't want to be rejected. We don't want to be disapproved of. And so we'll go along with the group even though we know full well they're wrong. And that's what normative social influence is about. We know that our judgment is the correct judgment, but we go along with the group to avoid the displeasure, you know, the discomfort of being the one who stands out. The other kind of social influence, though, is one where, you know, sometimes we do think that the group knows things that we don't know. And so we call this informational social influence, when we go along because we think, well, maybe the group knows something I don't know. You know, maybe my glasses aren't working right. You know, maybe I'm just seeing it wrong. How can they all be wrong and I'm the one person who's seeing it correctly? Now, remember, the participant really believes that all those Confederates are also participants. So they have no idea that the Confederates are giving false answers. So the participants come to the conclusion that it can't be possible that I'm the only one in this group who can see correctly. So they start to go along. They start to conform to the group. And that's what we call informational social influence, where we're relying on the group to provide us with information that we worry that maybe we are lacking. Okay, let's go ahead and take a break here, and we'll come back in the next segment. We'll talk about another kind of social influence, which is obedience.